Okay, welcome back to House Education, Wednesday, January 14th, 2026. For this segment, we've invited in folks from the Vermont Department of Environmental Conservation to talk about the status of PCB testing today. This is sort of a prelude to tomorrow's testimony from folks in the field who are wrestling with this. And we will likely have our witnesses back to talk more in detail about the specifics of H542 or where we want to go with that. But for the time being, this is more just to catch us up as to where things are today. Period. And well, Trish, I'll turn it right over to you to introduce yourself and go ahead.
Hi, everyone. Trish Coppolino, Vermont Department of Environmental Conservation. I'm the Senior Program Manager for our Contaminated Sites Program in the Waste Management and Prevention Division. And we are responsible for implementing the PCBs in Schools program in conjunction with the Department of Health and Agency of Education. My plan is to go over the program, so a brief refresher for everybody, and then go over current work that we're doing related to funding that was provided to us last legislative session. So starting with PCBs they're human-made contaminants that are included in building materials, capacitors, other electrical I can't talk right now. PCBs are human-made chemicals that were commonly used in building materials and electrical equipment built or manufactured before 1980. Monsanto was the sole company that created these PCBs. The United States Environmental Protection Agency banned them in 1979. PCBs can cause serious health problems. Potential for health effects from PCBs, as with other chemicals, depends on the amount of time you're exposed to them and the concentrations at which you are exposed to. The PCBs can cause effects to nervous, immune, reproductive, and endocrine systems. PCBs are also classified as human carcinogens. This means that exposure to PCBs can cause cancer. High levels of PCBs in indoor air of schools represent the biggest exposure to PCBs for students and staff. So there are multiple ways that people can be exposed to PCBs. Breathing PCBs in indoor air in schools is the largest exposure to people right now that we can see. PCB levels in indoor air of schools should be kept as low as reasonably possible.
Can I challenge your previous statements?
Please.
Somebody lives in an apartment building that has much, much higher levels of PCBs than in their school. Isn't that actually the highest level exposure they're going to get than in school?
It could be if there's PCBs in their apartment building. I mean, if there's no PCBs in the school, then that's not going to be their highest exposure either. So the information that we've seen and has been provided to us basically shows that in areas where PCBs exist, in your diet, in ambient air, and in other locations, those concentrations that exist are highest in schools.
But we don't test the ambient air anywhere but schools.
Well, we have ambient air testing in a lot of other places. When we created our background standard for indoor air, when we were looking at all of the different ways that we can be exposed to PCBs and all of the different ways that PCBs could impact what we're seeing in a school, we looked at a lot of studies from places, mostly in Europe is where they're sharing them, in places that are considered to be uncontaminated. So there's some background PCB exposure everywhere because we use PCBs a lot. Monsanto manufacture a lot of PCBs. I don't think it's an unfair statement to say PCBs exist in every corner of this round earth. You can find them somewhere. So we can look at places that were built after 1980 should not have PCBs in them and look at what those concentrations are. There has been some work looking at other buildings that were built before 1980. There's not a lot of PCBs that we see in housing or apartment buildings. So we're basing that statement on all of the data that exists currently to us.
Yeah,
So PCBs, they don't break down readily. They're something that lasts like
Correct.
whatever other things that last a long time.
And they bioaccumulate. Yes.
Okay, do keep. Thank you.
You're welcome. I think to go off of my written notes right now, the thing that I think the thing that's the hard thing to understand is that we'll use a school because that's what we're talking about. A school can do a small amount of work to do a renovation in their building. So maybe they get new windows and they take out the caulking that had the PCBs in it. But the PCBs themselves are, say, a magnificent chemical because of the way they can just migrate in the atmosphere and then contaminate something else. So when you look at,
you should describe it as a magnificent chemical.
I mean, it's a magnificent chemical. It does horrible things, but the chemical itself, I mean, the way it was manufactured, I am a chemist. It's a magnificent chemical when you look at all of its features, but the outcomes of it are not great for the humans or the environment. That is the downside of PCBs. They could do great things, but they cause worse things when they're
Too fast, really.
Right. So the PCBs themselves, they exist for a long time, which is why we're still seeing them at such high concentrations, even for some schools that have gone through major or minor renovations. They still exist in building materials at the school that they continue to emit and then reabsorb into a different building material and then re-emit and absorb into a different building material. They're really difficult to manage environmentally, but like I said, the risk of them to the human population is ultimately is cancer from them. And it does go to, again, the concentration and time of exposure. Some people, may be really sensitive and have health outcomes with smaller amounts and less exposure than the same people that sat in the same classroom with them as other people. It may take a while and higher concentrations before you'd actually see a health outcome.
But we aren't going to litigate science here because we're not qualified. You're qualified, we are not.
So, but there are multiple studies that show that impacts from PCBs do cause cancer. And I think I hear you questioning just how the science works in determining what that concentration is, because it is different for each person. And so when the health department looks at this, they look at trying to create a circumstance where they're trying to address risk for the person who is most susceptible to the impact. So schools renovated or built before 1980 have a high likelihood of PCBs being present in the building materials and the indoor air. So that is, the true statement. In August of 2020, this is how the program started. So Brownston High School had PCB impacts that were identified, and we started looking into PCBs in the rest of our schools in Vermont. So in 2021, we had Act 74, which required all public and approved and recognized independent schools built or renovated before 1980 to test their indoor air. That initially was supposed to be done by July 1, 2024. It was extended to 2025, and now it's extended to 2027 to have all this work completed. Vermont Department of Environmental Conservation has the authority to require schools to address releases of PCBs to indoor air and reduce concentrations to health protective levels established by the Vermont Department of Health. Under Act 178, $13.5 million was set aside for funding to investigate, do testing, assessment, and remediation of schools, and $16 million was set aside for Brownston High School to dispose of PCBs. So I will state that I don't think there is any question that PCBs are toxic chemicals. There's no question it's time consuming and costly for the state and the schools to do this work. But the science and the chemicals are clear. PCBs pose long-lasting health risks to students and staff. And the work under the sampling program helps to ensure PCBs can be reduced and removed in Vermont schools. So I'll get to where we are now. The funding that we received was $9.5 million to move forward and help 6 priority schools. We have not been conducting any additional testing at schools or cleanup at other schools outside of these 6 schools. I can go into later several schools that are continuing to do work on their own. They are either in the process of a renovation or they're consolidating and they're trying to do work. Several schools are closing but being repurposed for other uses and are coming to our Brownfields program. And so we're working on those schools through that process. In every instance, they're still looking for PCBs in their schools and doing it voluntarily to remove them as part of their redevelopment process. So 2025, 2026, these are the numbers and what we're doing. There are 328 schools in Vermont that we know of that were built or renovated before 1980. 183 schools have had inventories. So that's classes off 56%. 157 schools have been sampled. So the first number was we did the inventory, but we didn't get to all the schools to do the sampling. So that's why there's 157 schools that have been sampled. 46 schools have PCBs detected above the school action level for that school. 145, so moving forward to continue the process, 145 schools still need to have an inventory and 171 schools still need to have indoor air sampling. The 6 schools that we're working on.
I'm going to just interrupt for a quick second. It's just about budget.
Yeah.
So is it fair to say that of the 13 million that was set aside, 13.5, that's gone? Hence last year's request for the 9.5 million that was transferred from a different fund. And that's kind of what we're talking about now with the 6 schools. Yeah.
So the 6 schools that were chosen because they had immediate action level indoor air concentrations, which are 3 times the school action level. And there were some limiting use happening in that school. Either the space couldn't be used or they were using it at less time, 6 hours instead of 8 hours. So they were reducing the time that they could use those spaces. So Bellas Falls Union High School, Green Mountain Union High School, Hartford High School, North Country, Union High, SOAR Learning Center, and Twin Valley Elementary School are the schools that we prioritized to use 9.5 million towards. In the document I shared, I put in the costs that we've approved to date to do work at these schools and the work that we're doing.
And just to be clear for the committee, this doesn't include money previously spent on these schools. For example, North Country Union High School, it says 1.1 million. The actual total is more like 9 million.
I don't know if it's that much, but yes, there's a lot more million before this 1 million.
I have a question. In where it says 328 schools,
Yes.
and then underneath it says 183 had inventories and 157 were sampled. What does it mean, inventories?
Great question. So the process that we use is we will hire a consultant and they'll go out to the school and they will go into every room in the school and they will document what is in the school for construction. So do they have an HVAC system, a univent system? What type of paint do they have? What type of construction do they have? What do their windows look like? Have there been any renovations? They'll take all of that information and then they will group the rooms into specific groups. So they'll say these 10 rooms here were all built the same. They all have the same paint. They all have the same windows. They all have the same heating, ventilation systems. And they'll say, this is one group. And then eventually when we get to the sampling part of it, we basically say you need to collect 30% of a group. So if there's 10 rooms, we'd say you need to collect 3 samples within that group and it should be representative of that group to let us know if there's PCBs there.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So the only thing that I wanted to point out is at the bottom of the document, it says, or not the document, but the summary of schools where we're spending the 9.5 million on. It says there's 3.829 million remaining. The intent is to take the remaining amount of money and put it towards Green Mountain Union High School to help with their corrective action plan implementation. They have been patiently waiting, and they are the school that is next in line for cleanup, along with Bellas Falls and Twin Valley. The other schools are receiving planning documents, so they will get the corrective action alternatives document, which goes through all of the different options for cleanup, the costs associated with it, long-term effectiveness, and any long-term monitoring that might be associated. And then the actual document that is what we call a corrective action plan, which says this is how we're going to clean up the school and what the costs are. Both of those documents are shared publicly, but they're also documents that we work really closely with the school on and the school boards to help us make sure that we're selecting options that they want to see happen at their school.
Yeah.
Clarify, ECAA,
That's a corrective action alternatives document,
okay, and CAP is,
corrective action plan.
got it, thank you.
Yes. The rest of the document is really going over some of the schools that are continuing to do work on their own. And as I explained earlier, when a school decides to conduct work on their own, we make sure that we still work with them. We send them an approval letter for all the work they're doing and letting them know that when and if we receive any funding, we will reimburse their costs for the work that they're doing. So several schools have gone through, done some.
Are these schools that have exceeded the school action level?
Some of them have, and some of them have decided that they wanted to do the work because they were doing a planned renovation and they wanted to follow the process. So they're reaching out to us in advance.
Okay, but in that case, it's not really voluntary. That just falls under a different set of regulations.
It's voluntary because we're not paying for it. So I think under the statute, it says the state's going to pay for all of the work that needs to happen. And there,
It says state's going to pay for all of the work that's going to happen under the school testing program.
correct.
It's not under we're going to do a renovation and it's required we test.
Yes. For the renovation piece, it's still a school that's in line that has to go through the process, and they're basically going in and doing the process in advance of their turn happening. It happens to align with the fact that they're doing a renovation, but they're doing it all in advance of that and preparing.
I would put voluntary in quotations.
Okay, I will put it in quotations. So I listed out the schools that are continuing to do work without state funding, paying for it right now. And then at the bottom, I also provided you some of the schools that are going through our Brownfields program. So those are schools that are being repurposed for other uses in their community. And in that process, a lot of the work is being funded with federal or state money through the Brownfields program. And I'm happy to answer any questions you have about a specific school or any other work that we're doing.
If we were to have any of these 6 schools in front of us, would they say, yes, we are being reimbursed for all of the costs involved with having levels above the school action level?
I would, yeah.
I would say, with the exception of probably paying for the electricity that it costs to run all these fans.
Yes. So we were able to, for this last round of work or this current round of work that we're doing, entered into grant agreements with the school. So DEC is paying for everything now. The process is the consultant submits a work plan cost estimate to us. We approve it, and then the school submits for reimbursement from us. And so as far as I know, we are reimbursing them for all of the costs that are associated with PCBs.
And so you bring up an interesting point. We did the 13.5 million that had to run through the AOE. This is now directly through you since it's your money. AOE is kind of out of it, I guess.
Yeah.
Representative Brady?
Oh, I was just curious, is it one consultant, like one firm that's doing all of them? Or are there multiple that the state's working with?
There's 3, and we left it up to the schools to select the consultant. So if they wanted to continue with the consultant that's been doing the work, they could. I know that Hartford put their school out to bid, but they ended up choosing the same consultant. that was doing the work before.
Are those Vermont firms, do you know, or are they?
They are all Vermont firms. Yeah.
Once again, express my regret for not having gotten into the
Right.
charcoal filter business. myself. Yeah.
Clarifying, just clarifying. NFAP. It's another
No.
acronym.
It's no further action plan.
Got
So
it.
that means we
Thank
did
you.
work. We don't need to do any more work and we're gonna close out the
Thank you.
site.
So, I said this last year, I'll say it again. Frankly, really appreciate the coming up with the 9.5 million, the targeted way in which that is being used. Might we see something similar to that in the upcoming budget presentation?
I'll let Matt answer questions.
Second, I-
So for the record, Matt Chapman, I'm the director of Waste Management and Prevention Division. We normally don't talk about the budget before the budget address. I mean, there are,
Can I ask it in a way that you might feel more comfortable with? Is the remaining $3 million enough to handle the need for, okay.
I think that, that is, of course, the challenge. And I think it's something that the committee has identified and something that we don't disagree with, is trying to make sure that we're aligning the work with the capacity both by the schools, state, and the available funding, and trying to find ways to make things work. So that's, we're doing what we can to do, I think, similar to some of the things that have been talked about by the committee.
So we discussed the bill that I sponsored earlier today. There's a lot in it, but I'd say probably one of the sort of baseline lines in the sand is the deadline for all schools to be tested, because there's just no money to pay for that testing. And you can answer this later or answer it now. Does the administration have an objection to us suspending that deadline while there's no funding available to provide that testing?
So I'm going to say that the agency, I'm not going to go so broad, because I think, as the committee knows, this program is a collaboration between the Agency of Education, the Agency of Human Services, Department of Health, and A&R. And we certainly involve the Attorney General's office because of all of the ongoing litigation that's going on. I think we appreciate that the legislature, and I think all of the laws have been clear up to this point, that if the funding is not there to pay for the testing or the work that's going to be done, then it's not an obligation on the school to come up with that funding. So, I think that, again, probably better to have this conversation in a week after the budget address.
Yeah.
But if the funding is not there in the budget to provide testing for these schools, then I think it makes sense to push that date back or have another conversation about that date, so that we're not putting an unreasonable expectation on schools.
Thank you. Appreciate that. So tomorrow we've got a number of superintendents coming in from these 6, plus maybe a couple others. What are we going to hear from them in terms of how this isn't perhaps going as well as it might appear on this?
Well, I think to set the table for that, we are trying to address some large impacts to schools, and we're trying to do that while school is in session, and it puts us at odds, and it's difficult, but I think we've been working through the best way that we can with the schools. I would say their frustration exists when we implement something and it isn't perfect when we're done with it, and we need to try and address it a little more. So Twin Valley Elementary School, they weren't able to use their gym at the time frame that they wanted to because the cleanup took a little bit longer than it was supposed to. But the results are great now. The concentrations are almost below the pre-K SAL, and at the concentrations that existed there below before didn't allow anyone to use the gym. So we made a lot of great progress there, but I think there was some frustration just on some of the timeframes that it took, and maybe that I would put it to the timeframes. North Country.
I was going to ask for a North Country update.
North Country is a difficult school. It's huge. There are a lot of PCB issues at this school. There seems to be a really big connection between heat and increases in PCB concentrations at this school.
And by heat, do you mean artificial heat in the winter or summer heat?
Outdoor temperatures
Okay.
seems to really be impacting the indoor temperatures at this school. We have a lot of suspicions on what is causing that. Again, we are at the point right now with North Country where the school is trying to decide what to do with their school. And so we're trying to use a Band-Aid until they can figure out what to do. But instead of putting a lot more money into the school, we're trying to keep it at a place where the indoor air concentrations are health protective. They can still use the school until they come up with the best outcome for their school district and how they want to move forward. So North Country is difficult. I think it's difficult because of the size, because we continue to find more PCBs there than we originally thought were there. There's high concentrations of PCBs in the superficial soils outside the school. And so we're trying to work through the best way to make sure they don't spread, that people don't come into contact with them, that they don't get pulled in through their univent systems that are right at the surface where the soils are. So there are a lot of different PCB sources and ways that PCBs are causing impacts there that we're trying to manage until there's a better plan on what the path forward is.
I suspect their level of frustration is high, given the disruption and money spent to date without the result that everybody had hoped for.
I think everyone's frustration is high around that, not just theirs. We put a lot of time and energy into trying to do the best that we can based on the science that exists. And I still think there's a lot more to do. And that outcome is going to be coming soon when we finally get some cleanup plans from the consultant. Overall, I think we work well together. We understand that we're all trying to solve a solution to get to a better outcome, but it's a frustrating problem to work through. Let's see, what else is everyone going to say? Hartford High School. Hartford is a difficult one.
Is that North Country too?
I'm not sure. Hartford's going a little slower than we would like it to go. I think we've been trying to push the work to happen. And the school is trying to maybe take more control over how it's working. And there's a difference in opinion on what needs to be cleaned up and what doesn't need to be cleaned up. And so we've just been working through stuff that's below the SAL that the school wants to also address, and areas that are above the SAL. But I think we found a path forward. And we're looking for the consultant to get us those planning documents and then to a corrective action plan.
Is it fair to say that in some of these schools, they're all at different sort of stages, but like you talked about at Green Mountain Union High School, one of the things you spent money on is testing the material that the PCBs may have migrated into and to what level they need to be addressed.
Yeah.
So theirs could turn into a multi-million-dollar project. We're just not there yet. Is that?
Green Mountain, you mean?
Yeah, or any of these other ones, but mainly Green Mountain.
I would say North Country, if I go back to North Country, which has been the school that has had the highest concentrations in all of their classrooms. It is not just specific areas in their school. It is their entire school except for their gym area. Hartford is just a small portion of their school. Twin Valley is a small portion of their school. Bellas Falls is a small portion of their school. So we can highlight the specific areas within those schools. North Country is the entire school pretty much. So that one is the difficulty that we're having with North Country. With Hartford, they had a small portion that were above the IAL. They were lucky enough to be able to move their students off campus and not use those spaces.
Immediate.
Thank you. Sorry.
It's like, you gotta deal with this now.
Yeah. So that was Hartford. We were able to relocate some students and not have to worry about those classrooms, which allows us to focus a little more on them. Green Mountain was the same. Their third floor was the one that was most contaminated. They haven't used that floor, but now they're looking to, I think, bring in 6th and 7th graders. And so we're looking at the best way for that to happen at Green Mountain Union High School.
Bell's Fault, it says here that most recent sampling had PCB concentrations below. Does that mean they've been able to turn off their filters?
They have. They turn off their filters. Bellows Falls actually put in a new Univent or HVAC system. So that was part of, they were doing that on their own. They had money to do that. So they implemented that. We were doing some cleanup. We're doing, I think the last phase of cleanup there, they had PCBs that were sprayed onto some of their I-beams. So that cleanup work is happening right now, but we're seeing great results at Bellows Falls.
Sorry, give me for the committee, I didn't mean to go into individual cases.
Okay.
All right. Folks have other questions? So just sort of as we talk about this, tomorrow, we're going to hear from some superintendents, so you just get a sense of what's on the ground. Friday. Then we will probably come back with these folks to talk a little bit more about actually H542 specifically, kind of where the administration might be on it, what might be. I mean, I just want to be clear. I put that bill in. I put it in sort of like asking for the world and assuming that it's going to get pared back in order to sort of based on testimony that we hear. So, you know, that bill's going to be adjusted based on testimony, and I'm obviously fine with that. But that's sort of the process with all of this. I mean, again, to me, the big concern is we've got a deadline sitting on the books that all schools are required to test, and we have no money for it. I did have a question, but it's all out of my head, so I think I've spoken enough on this.
These will kill your memory.
Last, yeah, even tested my old high school yet to know exactly.
It migrates right in.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you.
That is going to wrap it up for us today because we're on the floor at 3, and we have a caucus of the whole. Can anybody tell us what the topic is for the caucus of the whole?
Election of the
Is it okay? That's a general sense. Okay.
We're
Do check the agenda as we've been adding things. So now we do have some work on Friday afternoon from 1 to 3. Sorry,
1 to 3, but not scheduling at 30.
nothing at 3 or going 3 or 3:30.